A rare morning game at the Jane. We'll talk about Oregon and Abilene Christian softball that took place this morning, and it was still nice and sunny. Well, it wasn't. It was cloudy, but there was no rain. Let's head on over to the Oregon Man Clinic's hotline, and we welcome in a good friend of the program. We call him El Toro. It's Max Torres. You can follow him, M Torres Sports, on Twitter. ScoopDuck on 3. It's the On 3 website. He's the West Coast recruiting analyst, Bay Area native, Gonzaga alum. And he joins us now. Max, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Spring practice, everything's opening up, so we get to talk about it. We talk about it year-round here no matter what, but let's start here. Spring practice begins. Is this Dante Moore's team now, and what do you want to see out of Dante in the spring?
I think everyone is looking at it as if it's Dante Moore's team entering spring practice, but of course the coaching staff's going to spin it as a competition as you would at any other school in the country. So with Dante, I think what I'm looking to see from him this spring is just stepping more into that leadership role that I think he is certainly more than ready for. I think looking back at his high school career, incredibly decorated. I want to say he had won multiple Michigan State titles, and he was always the guy on his team. So he certainly fits that mold of a little bit of a quieter guy, but you need to have a guy that can lead as your quarterback. And I think just seeing him take the bull by the horns and just be aggressive in spring ball is really what you're going to be looking for, and build that chemistry with the receivers and show why he came to Oregon and chose the unique path that he did to sit behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. I think this spring we'll hopefully be able to see or hear about some instances where it's like, wow, okay, we can see this kid really soaked everything up and ultimately benefited from a redshirt year.
Max Toro's joining us. We call him El Toro here on the Danny and Justin radio program, talking all things Oregon recruiting. And there was we're going to stay on the quarterback side. There was an image that was sent out on social media. Jared Curtis, who's a target for 2026 at quarterback, I think the top-rated quarterback, sent out a image. I think it was of the coastline. It looked like it was Oregon, but the tag said Eugene. So it seems like Mr. Curtis has been in the state of Oregon on an unofficial visit. So how important is that for Oregon? Is that encouraging that he was here?
Certainly, it's huge. I think Jared Curtis has really become the biggest name on Oregon's board now in the 2026 recruiting class. Of course, this comes after Oregon lost a commitment from four-star quarterback Jonas Williams, who flipped to USC. Not a move that was unexpected by many that follow or cover the Ducks. I think it was, to some degree, kind of bound to happen, right? Because Jonas Williams was committed to Oregon since August of last season, but Oregon still pursued and is pursuing multiple quarterbacks in the 2026 class, Jared Curtis being the main one, and then Folsom's Ryder Lyons, who's kind of a de facto 2027 recruit, being the other one. So I'm not saying that Williams has said he got rubbed the wrong way. He hasn't gone on record saying that, but I think we can kind of infer that probably didn't sit well with him, and that is something that I think we're seeing more and more of today. When you look at the world of competition, I think that Oregon, like any other school, is probably a little bit QB greedy, but who wouldn't be? You want to have as many great players at the most important position as you possibly can. So that's just the nature of the beast. And having Curtis on campus this weekend for a multi-day unofficial visit is a great development for Oregon as they battle Georgia and look to kind of finish on the right side of an Oregon versus Georgia recruiting battle. And it feels very fitting that they're doing it against, I guess they're battling for, I should say, a former Georgia commit.
Max, first of all, thanks for being back. We always enjoy speaking to you here on Fox Sports Eugene. You mentioned a couple quarterbacks that Oregon's going for in this 2026 class. You mentioned Ryder Lyons, a de facto 2027 guy. Does that sort of make Jared Curtis more of a priority than Ryder Lyons kind of heading into this sort of cycle, I guess? Or really, is it a possibility that they could go after both guys?
I'll say this. Oregon's doing all they can to get both the guys, but based on my knowledge of these recruitments, it certainly feels like Curtis is the bigger priority, and I think that makes sense. That's no slight to Lyons. I've seen him multiple times in person. He's a phenomenal player. But the reality of it is this: Curtis is the guy that's going to be able to help your team sooner. So if you have to choose between those two, I think that you don't really want to take unnecessary risk by potentially putting too many chips into the Rider Lions recruitment. But I know that Oregon loves Rider Lions. They view him as a quarterback that you go out and win a national championship with. He's a West Coast guy, so that also makes him super important. But these mission recruitments are a little bit tricky to navigate because they just come with a little bit of a layer of uncertainty, right? But Lions is taking, I think, a 1.5-year mission trip or 18 months. It's shorter than your traditional 2-year trip that you see a lot of guys take. And he's going to be going on it right when he graduates early in December. So we'll continue to follow that recruitment, and I fully expect Oregon to get an official visit from Lions as it stands now. But I'd be curious to see how things develop if Curtis were to commit to Oregon.
Oregon had been doing so well recruiting receivers under Junior Adams. Of course, he leaves for the Dallas Cowboys. Oregon brings in Ross Douglas from Syracuse. And I'm just curious it's been a while since we've been able to talk to you, Max. What do you think the impact of him coming in is going to be?
That's an interesting question. I think it still remains to be seen, right, with him just joining the staff and spring ball getting underway here in the near future. But I think it's overall going to be a net positive. And Junior Adams is a great coach, great recruiter at Oregon. But a lot of these hires that Lang has made, I think you could argue that all of them have been strong hires. So we'll see what Ross Douglas can do. He comes to Oregon with some NFL experience, which is great. He was part of one of the best passing offenses statistically in college football last year, and he's young. So I think there's a lot to like about this hire. I think he's only 30 years old, and we've seen Dan Lanning kind of put a precedent on youth, and it's kind of a youth movement to a degree in Eugene. So I think he's going to bring some great football knowledge and some hunger to the recruiting trail, which I think are a great combo.
Max Torres, El Toro, joining us on the Oregon Man Clinics hotline. You can consume the content on ScoopDuck on 3. Follow him on Twitter at mtorresports. Also, he is a Gonzaga alum. We don't hold that against him. He's a Bay Area native as well. Don't hold that against him either. And he joins us here on the Danny and Justin radio program. Max, there's been a lot of chatter in the last month about should colleges hold spring games, and Texas has backed out of theirs. They're just putting it on a pause. Nebraska said no. A lot of it's being blamed by the coaches on, hey, somebody can poach one of our players, get them to decommit and come back, NIL, all that. What is your thought on a spring game? And we're just talking about Oregon and how important a spring game is for the Ducks.
Yeah, I definitely am happy that Oregon plans to move forward with its spring game as of right now. It's a huge event to the community in Eugene and really just the state as a whole. You have to think about it through the lens of Oregon not being a state with a professional football team. So the Ducks fans want to get their football fix however they can. And if they were to take away the spring game, that would obviously remove that opportunity to have an awesome, beautiful spring Saturday inside Autzen Stadium and get a little taste of what's cooking with Dan Lanning and the Ducks in 2025. So it's super important for the community. Obviously helps the coaching staff get some clarity internally with where some of these guys stand on position battles. And then also you have to look at it through the recruiting lens. It's traditionally been the single biggest recruiting event of the year. And I think that maybe that changes a bit now that you're in the Big Ten and you can host a marquee game like an Ohio State game last year. That was probably the most loaded visitor weekend I think I've ever seen in my time covering the Ducks. So there's a lot of layers that go into this, but I think that canceling spring games is kind of a soft move. You can complain about canceling all you want. I think it's going to happen regardless. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
And Max, you know these rosters as well as anyone, just because you obviously cover all these recruits, you follow the transfer portal stuff. Is there anyone that it's a little bit under the radar that you're maybe looking forward to seeing on the spring game field that fans should look out for?
Sure. I think that there's a couple of guys that come to mind. I'll say a couple of the younger guys How about we start on offense with Dink Riggs, the running back out of the Washington, D.C. area, St. John's. He only had, I want to say, 6 carries last year, and that was in the Washington game, I believe. But he did find the end zone for his first time as a college player. And even his limited number of carries had a lot of Duck fans excited about his wiggle, his elusiveness, and his top-end speed. I remember covering him coming out of high school and was told by a source that this is kind of a guy that could be the next Bucky Irving at Oregon. And if Duck fans remember how successful Bucky Irving was, I think that they would be in a hurry to sign up for more of a player like that. So I'll go Dink Riggs on offense, and then on defense, I'm going to go in the secondary because it's going to be a new look secondary this year with 2 guys. I'm going to talk about cornerback Dakota Fields, who really announced himself in last year's spring game with an awesome interception, but he ultimately went on to get hurt and missed his entire true freshman season. But I covered him in SoCal when he was coming out of Gardena Serra alongside fellow Duck Roderick Pleasant. And this is a dude who has all the tools to be an elite quarterback. 6'2", 185, 190 pounds. He's a guy that's really attacked his rehab and recovery aggressively. And I think that he's exactly what you're looking for in a cornerback as a guy like Dan Lanning or Tosh Latoy. And then also Ifeoma Badegwu, staying in that DMV area like Dean Griggs out of St. Francis Academy. He was an All-American and Under Armour All-American coming out. And one of the quotes that I've gotten from one of my sources was that he kind of plays with a screw loose. And I think that's the kind of aggression that you want in a defensive back. So there's snaps up for grabs in that secondary with Oregon looking to replace all 3 of its starting cornerbacks from last year. And I think Fields and Obadegu are going to be firmly in that mix.
His mama calls him Maxwell. We just call him El Toro. It's Max Torres joining us. If you want the premium content, we encourage you. On 3, the ScoopDuck On 3, you go behind the scenes and you get the members-only stuff. It is just a treasure trove of information that you can find there on the website. A good follow as well on Twitter at mtorresports. That's on the Twitter. So offensive line is something I think there would be on the outside looking in. You would say, wow, Oregon lost a lot. Marcus Harper's gone. Connerly's gone. Strother's gone. Alik Terry is an elite coach at that position. And there is, and I think the quote I want to pull out from you on your article says the cupboard's not bare. So talk us through a bit about what you see the offensive line kind of forming this next year for the Ducks.
The offensive line is a loaded group, and it's become a more and more consistently top-tier group at Oregon in recent years. But it's not a group that has been elite right out of the gate. Certainly look at last season, and the Ducks had some early struggles against Idaho and Boise State. But things really got rolling, and Alik Terry ended up developing a unit that finished as a Joe Moore Award finalist. So it's a little bit of the same case as far as some new faces here in the mix in 2025, but the Ducks lost all their starters from a year ago, with the lone exception being Iapani Pancho-Lalulu at center. And I think you could make the argument, aside from maybe left tackle, that if you could only keep one starter from your offensive line a year ago, you'd probably want it to be your center. So I think Pancho is going to be solid and really a center cog, pun intended, I guess, of this offensive line. But you bring in some huge names from the portal, and I think the Ducks really needed to, right? You have Emmanuel Pregnon from USC who comes over. He's probably going to man one of those guard spots. You have the towering offensive tackle Isaiah World, who's originally from San Diego Lincoln, where the Ducks have recruited very well over the years. He comes in to probably take that left tackle spot. Alex Harkey out of Texas State, maybe a little bit of a lesser-known name, but a guy who's played some really good football. And I interviewed one of his coaches when he committed, and he just told me that he has all the tools and that people are going to love Harkey. And then you also have to look at some of the other guys that have played a little bit on the roster, right? You look at Matthew Bedford, who came over from Indiana a season ago, but got dinged up and ultimately only saw the field in one game for Oregon last year. So we're still looking for clarity if he's going to be eligible to play this year, but I think all signs point to that. We're seeing them working out with the team on these social media posts. And then Dave Iuli and Kavika Rogers are two other guys that played a good handful of snaps, more than a handful of snaps, I would say, in Bedford's absence last year. So seeing how they factor into this equation is going to be interesting. So all the talent, a lot of experience, but not a lot of experience playing together, playing as one, as 5 members of the same offensive line. So how quickly Oregon can develop that chemistry on the offensive line is going to go a long way towards telling us how efficient and effective this offense under Will Stein can really be.
Wanted to ask you about a couple 2026 recruits, of course, here in Eugene. So wanted to ask you about a couple guys. Really, last year it was the first one, Tony Cumberland, who came over to Willamette High School, transferred from, I believe it was Arizona. And now this year it's happening again. Vilami Maola is also going to transfer to Willamette High School. And I believe you got a chance to talk to both of these guys, Max. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm just curious, did you hear of any similarity between why these guys kind of decided to come to Eugene and maybe start a little bit of that transition early to become a Duck, it seems like?
I didn't hear any specific reason from either of them, but I think we can kind of read the tea leaves, and it shows that both of these guys are very locked in with the Ducks. I mean, Eugene hasn't exactly been a hotbed for elite high school football talent. So seeing Cumberland dominate in the 2024 season, he told me that he was excited to have another elite defensive lineman next to him. So he's hopefully not going to be getting double and triple teamed in some cases. So I think that the rest of Oregon high school football has to, those offensive lines have to be on the lookout, because these are 2 absolute behemoths in the trenches. They're going to be getting after the quarterback. Malala was an interesting one, too, because he was formerly committed to USC before flipping to Oregon, coming out of the state of Utah. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's pretty productive from what we've seen, and he's just an absolute force to be reckoned with on the interior. So I might have to get up to Eugene and cover a couple of Willamette games next year, because those guys look like they're going to be wrecking havoc.
You let us know when you're coming up. We'll buy you dinner. We'll lock that
Sounds
in.
good.
Max Torres at mTorres Sports on Twitter. You can follow them at ScoopDuck on 3 as well. That's the Twitter handle for there. Trying to push Max. We're going to pimp for him to get to 21,000 followers. We need all the Danny and Justin listeners to jump on board with Max. It's a great follow. Max, final question. Dan Lanning agrees to a 6-year contract extension. It's news that was reported beginning of last week. So how do you see this in the profile of what goes on in college football, with coaches jumping, coaches get fired, movement because of NIL, I'm going to retire, but he's a young coach. What do you think this sends to the fan base, and more importantly to the players and other coaches, that Dan Lanning seems to be very happy where he's at, and he's here for at least the next 6 years?
Yeah, it's just a message of confidence more than anything. I think it's Lanning's confidence in Oregon, and clearly Oregon's confidence in Lanning. And I feel like, to a degree, you could say it's a little bit of a warning shot to the rest of the college football world, because Oregon has so frequently struggled to have consistency and continuity at the top of their coaching staff. They thought they had it with Willie Taggart. They thought they had it with Mario Cristobal, at least at some point, but obviously that wasn't the case for either of them, as they both left for other jobs in their home state of Florida. And also about Will Stein and Tosh Lapoy signing contract extensions. That's huge too. So looks like Oregon has their guy, and he wants to be there as long as they'll have him. So that's a huge positive, and, the Ducks keep heading in the right direction.
All right, El Toro, thank you, buddy. We really appreciate your time. We always get smarter every time we listen to you. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk again soon.